The Marvel Handbook, Episode B1, Baron Zemo, Baron Mordo, and Alien Races, the BA-BANI.
The Marvel Universe.
Avengers, Black Panther, Black Widow,
Colossus and Cyclops,
the Crimson Dynamo,
Daredevil,
Doctor Doom, Doctor Strange, the Fantastic Four, Galactus, Ghost Rider, Motorcycle Hero, Hellcat, the Duck, the Human Torch, the Incredible Hulk,
Bruce Banner, Invincible Girl, MODOK, Mr. Fantastic,
Prince of the Deep, Nightcrawler,
Odin, Power Man and Iron Fist, Professor X, the Punisher,
Big Jones,
Sergeant Fury,
the She-Hulk,
Silver Surfer,
Spider-Man,
Spider-Woman,
Storm from the X-Men, the Thing, Ben Grimm,
the Mighty Thor,
Stadium Man,
Wolverine,
Brother Mordo. So he's the head of the Center for Reunification?
Yes, it's some kind of secret cult.
First I lose Mary Jane to Harry, now to this dangerous cult. I have to find a way to save her. But what hold does this Mordo have over her?
Alor seta, melaka chumponkra.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Brother Mordo, I had such a wonderful visit.
Good child. This institution's purpose is to make you content and fulfilled. Now, my children, go back to your chambers and rest. We will have another visit very soon.
I'm sure that Brother Mordo can help you in your quest, Mr. Parker.
Oh, that's why I came here.
Take him to Brother Mordo.
Mary Jane arrived here seeking the truth about her father. She has found it and found him. Why would you deny her such fulfillment? Isn't that what we're all longing for? After all, isn't there someone with whom you want to be reunited? Ah, yes. Of course there is.
Where am I? What happened? Did I really see my parents? I've got to get Mary Jane and get out of here before Mordo brainwashes me too.
My children, our time is at hand. We must dispel our enemies. Listen to my words. You are the army of Dormammu. You must recover the wand of Watum. Let nothing, not even your own destruction, stand in the way.
Nothing will stand in my way.
Spider-Man, what are you doing?
Doctor, I can't. Nothing will stand in the way of Mordo's will. Not even you, Doctor Strange.
Mordo. It can only be Mordo.
But Doctor, how can you be so sure that it's him?
It fits in with his dark purpose.
By the power of the wand, I release my master Dormammu into this dimension.
You borrowed this without asking permission, so I'll take this little doohickey out of your hands.
Name, Julia Raoul. Occupation, writer and artist of the Valkyrie Quartet. Base of operations, Florida.
Baron Mordo, this is a character that I first got introduced to by way of Spider-Man animated series. But I know that he appeared in Strange Tales.
If I recall correctly, he's in the very first Doctor Strange story. No, I'm mistaken. I think it was Nightmare in the first story. Mordo shows up in like the second story or so. Very early on.
Okay, because see, that's the thing. He's a character I didn't keep up with too closely. I mean, I saw him on 2 or 3 Spider-Man episodes, and that was about it. Comic book-wise, I know him and Doctor Strange didn't get along. He wanted to get the power from the Ancient One and become the Sorcerer Supreme, but he was unworthy, so he basically pledged his allegiance to Dormammu, flame-headed guy who I also saw in a cartoon. I have a pattern here. If I seen him on a cartoon, that's when I first seen him. Dormammu wants to escape the dark dimension to get into, quote-unquote, our world, Earth 616, and Strange and Mordo have had a lot of battles. I know in the cartoon it was voiced by Tony Jay, and I know in the movies He was played by Ejiofor.
I think it's Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Yeah. Well, he's another name that doesn't roll off my tongue. I like in the MCU that he's different. He ain't white Mordo. He's black Mordo. He's Carl Mordo. And he's not a Baron. I'm trying to figure out why would his name be Baron Mordo in the comics?
Villain.
I don't know. It's just strange. He's a Steve Ditko character more so than a Stan Lee one. I like to think because of how weird him, Dormammu, and Strange and Wong and all them get. Master of the Dark Arts he is, and the Legion Accursed and the Offenders were the teams he was a part of. Oh, and his middle name is Amadeus. Amadeus. I guess in the cartoon Spider-Man animated series, he's the one that brought the symbiote Carnage to Cletus Cassidy, who made Carnage on that cartoon. And I know it comes back to these cartoons, man. I tell you. And he was a superhero squad show, and he was also in the Doctor Strange Sorcerer Supreme movie from 2007, which I didn't like him there. But then again, they're a little more like they're trying to make him a little bit like the Mandarin a little bit because of the dark forces and using mystical energies and stuff like that. He's a weird character.
Yeah, I really hated that animated movie because it was based on the J. Michael Straczynski, Brandon Peterson miniseries, partially at least. And all that was trying to fit Doctor Strange into a Matrix box and basically do magical Matrix. And of course, everything was about martial arts, mystical martial arts. It felt like if you're going to have a character who's a mage, a sorcerer supreme, it shouldn't be about the physical assaults. But I think that's what they thought with Cell, and they did that in the cartoon. And I was so terrified they were going to do that in the motion picture when that came along that while I had my issues with it, I was at least definitely relieved that it wasn't Big Trouble in Little China. Not that I don't love that movie, but that's not what Doctor Strange is supposed to be, and that's not what Baron Mordo is supposed to be bringing.
He's from Transylvania, by the way, which is another interesting factoid right there about Carl Amadeus Mordo. Yeah, since he's a Baron, a Transylvanian Baron. Yeah, you're right about the mystical martial arts part, because I think in the MCU movie they do a little bit of that, but it's more like reading from spell books and doing the hand gestures and stuff like that, which I watched that movie recently. I could tell that a lot of it wasn't like using mystical artifacts. A lot of it was reading from the ancient magical text and studying those incantations and doing the book stuff. You try to treat that magic in the MCU at best like the way Ford said about our magic is like technology to you mortals, which I think is interesting, but at the same time also I'm like, from the comics he didn't even have to say a spell, he just threw up a symbol and there he went. And I know he was always trying to break Dormammu out of demon jail, the ruler of demon jail. So I know I saw him in the movie, he was interesting, but then he had his quest about killing depowering all magic users, which I think that's interesting if and when we see it in the next movie. But it would have been kind of interesting if they would have brought him back for like Avengers Endgame or Infinity Wars, like he's working with Thanos or whatever, but they didn't do that. Even I look at a lot of those MCU villains, I'm like, you could still kind of bring him back if you have Mordo do a spell casting and could resurrect people, or Dormammu through Mordo could resurrect people, after Strange have come here to bargain, since, the Avengers basically almost went back and rewrote time almost and splintered different universes and stuff like that. I know I'm talking about MCU, but I know in the comic books, Dormammu was always an ongoing threat, along with Mordo, who is always at his beck and call. I mean, he's a character I'm aware of. I just never read too much of him. Since I've seen him in other media, and I feel like that's always my cliff notes. I mean, I wish I was more of a Doctor Strange reader.
Mordo is a tricky one. I grew up reading his appearances, going back to the Steve Ditko stuff. The character that's in the movie is not Baron Mordo. It bugs me because I really enjoy Chiwetel Ejiofor. I've liked him since at least Serenity and Dirty Pretty Things. He was my choice for T'Challa when he was younger. Not when they were first talking about the movie, but in the mid-2000s when he would have been viable. And so you've got Baron Mordo in a movie played by a guy who doesn't look like Baron Mordo, who doesn't act like Baron Mordo.
I'm like this. If you can make him act like him, that's cool.
Yeah.
You can be a black guy from Transylvania whose middle name is Amadeus. That's
right. Yeah, that's cool.
You can do that.
But like, he doesn't have the jacked up Mordo hair. Mordo always had the worst hair sticking up.
Yeah, like it was like a widow's peak, but then it went up a little bit, like devil horns.
Yeah. The thing about Mordo, though, he was always kind of a toady. He was the lower level boss that Doctor Strange had to go through on his way to Dormammu, and he's very one note. He's a big cosmic jerk. So once you get past the origin story where he's trying to fool Ancient One, there isn't a lot there. So I understand the need to do more with him. His nobility and his desire to rid the world of mystical beings, he has a lot more in common with Silverblade in the movie. And Silverblade's also a ridiculous character. He's this guy with a big ridiculous mustache, and he's bald, but he's also got the giant bushy white hair, long hair in the background. He's kind of like uncool Sean Connery, circa like 89 or so. So I get why they'd want to make the change, and it's not like I have this devotion to Baron Mordo.
To me, he was always the guy that Spider-Man and Doctor Strange or Iron Man had to beat up on.
Right. He's a lower level boss on your way to somebody bigger. And so because I want the actor in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I'm okay with him changing the character so much. I do kind of miss the opportunity to see more of Cody, Baron Mordo. And they have told some good stories with him. They've told a lot of not so great stories with him, but I like the visual. I like the green costume. It lets you know that he's a villain and such.
I mean, even when I was watching the movie, I'm telling myself, you're going to do this different, right?
But yeah,
I was kind of waiting for Dormammu to show up. I wasn't waiting for Mads Mikkelsen to show up to be the principal antagonist.
Right. Baron Mordo was beaten by Doctor Strange basically before he even knew how magic worked, in the comics. Like, part of the origin is that Doctor Strange is able to outsmart him and outmaneuver him to get rid of him as the disciple so that he becomes a disciple. So even without powers, Doctor Strange was already besting the guy. I don't think that that's fair to inflict upon the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
It would be interesting, but then if you think about, since we got a black actor playing Baron Mordo, that would come across like, well, we're setting him up to fall, as opposed to like with the way the movie did it, where they gave him a genuine conflict at best. Like when Strange was like, well, do you have internet here? And he's like, oh, here's the password. We're not savages. But that part made me laugh because I'm like, well, I get that these two right now are not going to be buddies for much longer. But there's a little bit of gentle ribbing there, like, yeah, I know, Strange, you want to fix your hands, and also you want to check your stuff on the internet.
At the end of the day, the character that appears in the Doctor Strange movie is much more interesting, much better developed, and much more integral to the overall story that they're trying to tell with Doctor Strange in that movie than the comic book Baron Mordo ever could.
I wish they would look at what's in the MCU version and transpose that into the comic book version, but I know that's going to
Imperious Rex!
a lot of older readers.
I don't even know if Silver Blade's still alive anymore, the original Silver Blade. So you could easily do a similar character and just have that be the new Silver Blade. Yeah.
I mean, they've done it before.
Or certainly they could just add that character, possibly by a different name, into the circles of the Ancient One from back in those days and then just have him come back. And it's not like comic books are a retcon. So at the end of the day, I have to set aside my fanboy nonsense aside and realize the MCU improved upon that character. The character as representing the comic books would have been one of those forgettable one-note Marvel villains that they're always complaining about.
I would put it like this. I wouldn't want to see him again if he was just a one-note character.
Exactly.
It's kind of with Ultron. It's like, I want to see Ultron again. Throw the Accuser. I'd keep him dead. I mean, all the MCU villains besides Loki, because Loki, I'll give him this. You see him, you know what he's about. He's going to stab you in the back, but he's going to have fun doing it. And with Baron Mordo, I can look at him as the opposite of that. He's all business, but he's going to have a little fun with it, He might be working for Dormammu, but at the same time...
I don't think that'd be the case, though. I think that they've pretty well established in the first movie that this is a guy who has his own agenda, and it's an understandable one. It's an agenda that can fuel multiple movies, and you've got an actor who has the capacity to do really interesting things. I don't want to see the Dark Elf again, and that's what Baron Mordo would have been if they'd stuck with the comic books. So the character they have in the movie...
because even though we wasted one Doctor Who in that movie.
Yeah. And again, the Dark Elf is a great example. I really like Christopher Eccleston as an actor, and I think he could have been a great villain in a Marvel movie. He lost that opportunity because he played the Dark Elf, who's worthless.
Which to me, I mean, I've seen a little bit of the Walt Simonson run with the Dark Elf, and I feel like that's what Eccleston should have done. That's how they should have presented him visually, and that's how they should have done him even acting the character-wise.
Yeah. You needed
Malachite. We got Loki flying around, so we can't do that.
Yeah. We needed Malachite. We needed the color scheme. We needed that pizzazz. And instead we got some cheap jack Predator.
Good whirlwind. Now, Boomerang, Absorbing Man, hurry with those crates! Mind if we play through? The Avengers!
Baron Zemo and the Masters of Evil? What's wrong, Zemo? Hard to find good help?
Captain America!
Captain America? What are you doing here?
Tracking Zemo. He's after something big. Something I don't plan to let him get.
Let's get out of here! Not without what we came for!
So, even with all of you heroes on the alert, Baron Zemo still got away with one of the crates.
The trestle was blown. 8 men were down.
I would have emptied that train if those wretched Avengers hadn't interfered. Tiger Shark! I did not ask for your assistance. Smaller than I had imagined. Yet elegant.
What the heck is it?
An EMP generator creates
An electromagnetic pulse that can shut down all electronic equipment in a designated area for a limited time.
We're going back for the rest of the weapons, right?
Naturally. And this shall be the key to retrieving them. And at last, I shall wreak my vengeance upon the man who murdered my beloved father. I will break him as he broke my father. I will destroy the cursed Captain America. No, this time victory must be mine.
Then you're gonna have to earn it.
What have you done?
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Derek WC from History of Comics on Film and Fanholes Podcast, talking about the official handbook of the Marvel Universe.
So we want to do Baron Zemo?
Yes.
Did you want both of the Zemos, or did you just want the modern age one?
Isn't it only the modern age one in the original?
In the Book of the Dead is Daddy.
Oh.
Generally, if somebody talks about Zemo, they mean helmet, so I figured that's the way we were going.
Yeah, this is interesting for me because this is a character that has lots of nostalgia feels for me because of the multimedia tie-in aspect, because the first time I ever saw Baron Zemo was as a Mattel Secret Wars action figure. I was trying to piece this together in my head, but the card backs had these little 4-panel comics that would set up the character and maybe set up an internal rivalry among them. Some of them were ridiculous. I always make fun of. Some of them were kind of obvious, where it was like, okay, well, Captain America is the leader of the good guys and Doom essentially is the leader of the bad guys. So they had certain little 4-panel comics where Doom and Cap would face off, even though he's not the Fantastic Four and Doom's not the Red Skull. I get it. It kind of makes sense that they would face off. But I mean, I always kind of made fun of, they ran out of people to pair with one another. Wolverine and Kang were paired up. As a little kid, I was always like, Kang is Wolverine's arch enemy, right? Because that's what the toy told me. Learning more about it, you're like, oh, that's ridiculous. Wolverine would get fried by Kang. Like, this is dumb. Like, point is, with the Baron Zemo card back, I think he was either fighting, I'm pretty sure he was fighting Captain America, like he should be. They didn't do something wacky like have, I don't know, the Daredevil action figure fight with him or whatever. So that was like my first exposure to Baron Zemo. I thought the design was great. They've got Mike Zeck doing it, which is totally appropriate. He was the one who pretty much designed this iteration of his outfit. I do really, really think this outfit is cool. My secret machinations of, I do a Thunderbolts podcast called Justice Not Entirely Dissimilar to Lightning, who's like essentially the world's #1 Thunderbolt, but Baron Helmet Zemo, who disguised himself as Citizen V. This is, for me, an essential character of the Marvel Universe, like a standout villain. They have their way with him and make him a protagonist to a certain level. I guess they do the back and forth thing with him. He becomes protagonist in Thunderbolts. He gets his own miniseries and things like that, where probably have a certain level of identification with the character, and you don't just see him as a one-note bad guy type thing. At some point, I think certain writers want to return him to form, so then he goes back to being that one-note villain or whatever. So I guess it depends on like who's handling him and stuff like that. But the stuff that stands out to me is obviously the J.M. DeMatteis, Mike Zeck stuff in Captain America. Beyond that, then you've got the Kurt Busiek, Mark Bagley run in Thunderbolts. And then there's a lot of other cool stuff where I think eventually like Fabian Nicieza was writing Thunderbolts and Tom Grummett stuff. And, you know, there's a lot of other cool stuff that I think of when it comes to Zemo. But I think I like Zemo because I just like doing a German accent on the Thunderbolts podcast and having fun with it and everything. And obviously his origin is ridiculous. Once J.M. DeMatteis morphed him into a legacy villain that brought a lot of rich history to it, and the fact that he's in his own right a force of personality, whether he's a good guy or a bad guy, he's a great leader and he's got a lot of awesome master planning skills. He's obviously a complex and he's kind of a chess player. And so there are those aspects about him that are, even though he's a bad guy and he does bad things, there's still aspects where you can look at him and find things admirable because you're like, oh, look at how he snowed this guy and look at how he pulled the wool over this guy's eyes and everything. And he's such a master manipulator and evil madman. So you can get into that aspect. When he is the bad guy, he's a great foil for Captain America or the Avengers or whoever he's facing off against. To me, this is one of those things where it's hard to talk about because I feel like it's so, come on, dude, Baron Zemo. I feel like that's all I have to say, but I know for some people they don't know Baron Zemo from anybody. But for me, the Secret Wars toy, and then from there it was reading all the comic appearances and everything and just getting getting into the character. And that Secret Wars figure probably just ingrained him into my lexicon as somebody that must be important because, hey, he had his own action figure. This guy must be important. That's kind of the rationale of a young child. I guess now, like, it'd probably with kids, it'd be like, hey, they have their own video game, or Baron Zemo was in the video game, so he must be a pretty big deal.
I also love Baron Zemo. He was introduced during the golden age of my reading Captain America comics during the Mike Zeck run of the book. He had the Adhesive X sprayed on him. His face is covered by the mask, and so at some point they had to rip off the mask to show the ripped up face that he had because of his being adhered to his mask at one point. And so Mike Zeck being able to draw gruesome in a way that few could back in that time in the early 80s, the image of what this guy looks like under that mask was burned into my brain. I love the costume. I love the fact that he's so
by the Vishanti
that he can pull off lavender and fuchsia costume with white jungle spots on it and stuff. Only Zemo is cool enough to make this look work. There's a lot of villains out there like Lex Luthor and Magneto that they try to have both ways. He's a good guy, he's a bad guy. And these are two guys, because they make them into arch villains, they've always done something that gone way too far into the side of evil to make them irredeemable. And so I can never get on board whenever they try to make these guys anti-heroes because I know that Magneto killed 150 soldiers and stuff like that. Where Zemo has done some bad stuff, but they've never crossed the line, to my recollection, with him in a way that where I couldn't deal with him being on either side of the fence. He's, I think, inherently a bad guy because he lacks the morals, he lacks the conscience that you would need to be a heroic figure, but he can be a protagonist at times. He can definitely be an anti-hero at times without it offending my personal sensibilities. I don't feel like it's unethical to play him that way. I do love that he's an evil genius. I love that they go back and forth with him. I enjoy him much more as a Captain America villain than any of his other villains because somebody like Red Skull, there's a limit to how much I can enjoy a guy who's a Nazi, especially in modern times. It makes me mad sometimes that this guy is still active and still has the history that he has, even though it reinforces how evil he is. The fact that this is an evil that has not been dealt with is sometimes galling to me. Where Zemo can be a bad guy, but he's a comic book villain. Basically, he has all the affectations of an evil Nazi without the baggage, because he was not a Nazi. He's not particularly racist. He's definitely classist. He's definitely an arrogant aristocrat, and he's definitely done some Joseph Mengele style genetic modifications that if there's anything that would push him into the realm of being completely toxic and radioactive, it would be those experiments of his. But I find him a fascinating character. My brother had the action figure. My recollection is, though, that action figure was part of a wave that was not widely distributed in the United States. I think that was part of that line that was in Europe, and that there were select stores like Macy's that got them here in the States.
That second wave might have not been as widely distributed as the first, but Zemo was part of the U.S. wave. The ones that were part of the European wave were, and I don't have these because they're ridiculously expensive on the aftermarket, but it's Iceman, Constrictor, and Electro were all part of the European waves. But Zemo was still in that wave with Hobgoblin and Falcon and Daredevil. They definitely were, I don't know what the right word is, with comics, they have a low print run. There was definitely less of a manufacturer run for guys like Hobgoblin and Zemo than there were for, say, Kang. You ask anybody, Kang was the peg warmer. There were still Kangs when, I don't know, the 89 Batman movie came out. You go to Toys R Us and you'd still find a Sweet Christmas Secret Wars Kang. But like Hobgoblin and Zemo, you probably wouldn't have come across as easy. Like there weren't as many, but they were released in the U.S.
No, that's exactly right. When I was a kid, I would go to Kmart and they would have all the first wave Secret Wars, and that was it. I never saw any of the second wave figures. So to me, this was a rare and precious figure to find.
Oh, yeah.
I never found it. I never saw it in the stores. I had a Kang specifically because it was in the clearance bin, and it finally was like, well, it's 75 cents. I'll go ahead and buy it, and it'll be cannon fodder. And that's why I had a freaking Kang.
I'm like, that's how I got my Mego Hulk. It's the same thing. It was just the clearance. It was like Mego Hulk and Darkseid and Kang were still there way after the fact, once those lines were long dead.
And I would have traded so many figures to get my hands on a Zemo just because I thought he looked cool. I loved that he didn't look like anybody else out there. I do think it would have been cool, though, if they'd had him pitted against the Falcon, since Falcon was present during his first appearance. And in fact, Zemo is one of my favorites in part because I had the Power Record, which featured the Return of the Phoenix, which was the first Helmet Zemo. And so seeing that get called back in a comic book, I was really too young to be nostalgic for a Power Record when he was reintroduced into the main comics, but he was still like, oh my God, I know that guy. That's the guy from the Power Record. So I have all sorts of nostalgic reasons to dig on Zemo.
No, I get that because I was super nostalgic for Man-Bat even before he was on Batman the Animated Series, because I had the Robin meets Man-Bat Power Record. I was like the only dude who knew who Man-Bat was before he had lots of mass media exposures. It would be the same thing with Baron Zemo for you. You'd be like, dude, I remember that Power Record.
Absolutely.
That was awesome.
I had that one as well, so I'm totally with you on that, with that sweet Neil Adams artwork.
It's funny. I think the Falcon falls into that. Characters kept getting mismatched, like Wolverine and Kang. I'm pretty sure Falcon was facing off against the Hobgoblin because they both flew or something stupid. Okay, whatever. I know these guys aren't really supposed to fight one another, but they fly. Let them fight. But anyway.
It's funny, too, because you're coming at this from a Thunderbolts perspective, and I'm aware of the Thunderbolts material. I've read a fair amount of it, but I never think about it when I think about Zemo. I always think about him as the Captain America villain. And so it occurs to me, this guy's been translated into film now, and it's like, can you still do the Thunderbolts with Baron Zemo? Or can you still do the Masters of Evil with the cinematic Baron Zemo? And I think you could, but it's weird that didn't even occur to me when I would see him, because I'm just not thinking about him in those terms.
I'm always hoping, I don't even know if I jump ahead of myself so far as to think of the Thunderbolts. I mean, I know a lot of my friends that love Thunderbolts too already do jump that far forward, but me, instead of it being a bunch of movies where they drop hints about gems and Infinity Wars and all this other stuff, I would think the next cool thing you could do is set up, who knows, I was hoping maybe DC would get to an Injustice League first, but I don't think that's going to
Flames of the Fall Teen
happen now. So the way to go, I guess, is for me would be, dude, you've got Zemo, man, start plucking Crusher Creel from S.H.I.E.L.D. and Abomination from the Hulk movie and all this stuff, and make a full-on Masters of Evil and do the whole Avengers versus the Masters of Evil thing. I would be super stoked to see something like that, especially if Zemo was at the forefront of it.
I've been hoping for something like that since Phase 1 because of the disappearance of Red Skull and the assumption that he was going to turn up eventually. I absolutely agree with you. I think that the way to go for the next Avengers movie is Masters of Evil. If for no other reason than one of the things that Marvel's been smart about is they managed to take DC-ish concepts and get them into the cinematic universe before DC can do it. And since the DCEU is in such a state of disarray, if Marvel wanted to continue to just punish Warner Brothers, the smart play would be, well, let's get the Masters of Evil so that even if they wanted to do the Legion of Doom, it'll still feel like they're Johnny-come-latelys.
Yeah. The only thing, there's no cinematic Enchantress, but other than that, they can certainly make an assemblage of people, and that doesn't mean that they can't have another couple more solo movies and build up some of these other guys, maybe introduce them into the people like Screaming Mimi, Songbird, Moonstone, Fixer, and Mach 1. You can definitely have like the Beetle show up in a Spider-Man movie, that kind of thing.
Well, you're the one who reminded me that Enchantress's sister's already turned up on Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, I guess they could use her instead if they wanted to. Yeah.
Well, that and Taika Waititi's supposed to be working on another Thor movie, I would think. So that's a perfect place to throw in Enchantress. So I mean, really, when you think about it, who else do you have for the next Thor movie as a villain? They may not want to go with two females in a row, but Enchantress would be the most obvious one to get in there, even if she's a B villain.
Yeah. And the only other way I could see them going with it is doing like real modern stuff, like doing like Gore the God Butcher or whatever. But that's the only other thing that immediately springs to mind that I would go, ooh, cool.
Ladies and gentlemen, meet your Thunderbolts.
The Thunderbolts, are they the exciting new heroes the world needs?
Thunderbolts, strike!
Today makes at least half a dozen times the Thunderbolts have done the job we used to depend on the Avengers for.
It allowed us to move among you, disguising who we really are. The Masters of Evil!
In what is now becoming an old story, the Thunderbolts once again saved the city.
Enough of this hero talk. You will do as you're told.
But...
He's right. You may be wearing a Songbird costume, but underneath you're just screaming mean.
I can expose all of you right now. So you see, you really have no choice.
You know what? We're done playing these parts. It's time to live these parts.
No one betrays Zemo.
Figures, just when we go in on this hero thing, our blood runs out.
Avengers, Defenders, Thunderbolts. I make any team better.
We're Norman Osborn's A-team. And he's the big man in charge now.
This isn't the team I used to lead.
You, honey, are under arrest.
You have to fight for what's right every single day. Bulletproof skin or not.
We Thunderbolts have worked hard to change people's minds about us. But apparently, we've got a ways to go.
Justice, not entirely dissimilar to lightning, a Thunderbolts podcast, now playing on fanolspodcast.blogspot.com.
Name, Old Dude. Occupation, co-host of the Bonding Agents Father and Son Spy-Fi podcast. Legal status, citizen of the United States with no criminal record. Marital status, married. Known relatives, Diabolu Frank. Group affiliation, United States Navy. Base of operations, Texas.
Let's talk about the alien guy. Tell me about what that is and what you've learned about it and so on and so forth.
What we were talking about before, the alien?
No, remember you read that entry? It was the text entry just talking about that one alien race from the Marvel.
Oh, okay, the Bobby or Bob...
Something like that. BA-BANI, I think they're called?
BA-BANI.
Okay.
Which, by the way, now see, they break it up, but that's a Kurdish name.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, when you put the two that they split up, when you put them together, that's a Kurdish name. You know, I got a friend from Turkey. We talk about things, and he always talks about his Kurdish friend named that. I read it and I couldn't figure out why you sent it to me, so I researched it and I discovered that it has to do with the Avengers. Of course, I don't know what the relationship, but I wanted to find out about Moondragon.
Yeah, I figured that would be of interest to you.
So,
especially once Drax comes into Dimensions as well, I figured that would perk you up a little bit.
Well, I'd been a lot more interested if I'd seen the picture of Moondragon, bald-headed or not. She's a sex symbol kind of thing, and that's what we talk about a lot of times. It's the female that sucks you into these things. I still want to see her like her girlfriend. I know she's got some girlfriend somewhere.
Yeah.
Probably better looking than her. But yeah, when I first saw the name, I was going, is this guy a Kurd and he's just messing with us or what? But I thought it was really about the figure of that Norse god-looking guy standing there, right?
It's a golden, literally like a golden god-looking dude, like a Jesus figure almost.
Yeah.
He didn't have facial hair in the picture, right?
I don't think so.
Or in the actual stories that they appeared in, they only appeared in like 2 comic books. But in the actual stories, it was the 70s, and so a lot of those guys had very 70s hair. He already had the long hair, but they have like
they were in the 70s Avengers.
Yeah,
and you'd think I would have seen it.
Maybe 1980, but like right there on the cusp. It looked like the character designs.
Well, it would make a difference. I'm gonna tell you, I didn't get their deal when I read that.
And you read the
I was completely kind of disconnected. Like I said, I read the first few lines, got to Moondragon and her father Drax, and I went on the internet trying to look up the stuff. Surprising enough, there's even people who are posed as those characters.
Oh, like the cosplay and stuff? Like people in costumes and stuff?
Well, I found a couple of articles where they were talking about cable shows and possible movie as a spinoff.
You know, when we say Drax, we're talking about the Drax that's in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies.
Okay.
Yeah. So
well, I didn't know that, but I knew about that.
He's a lot different in the comics, especially the original comics. He's kind of a rageaholic whose sole mission in life is to kill Thanos. And then when Thanos ends up getting killed before he gets a chance to do anything with him, he's left rudderless. He was sort of an automaton, not an automaton, but he was killed. He was a human. His family was killed in a car wreck caused by a spaceship that I believe was being piloted by Thanos. And somehow the daughter ended up getting taken to Titan, where Thanos is from, and being raised by the Titans to become the psychic, telepath, all the kind of good stuff that she can do. Where Drax was recreated into I hesitate to use a term for it, not a golem, not a homunculus, but artificial being, where his soul was implanted in this artificial being, the green being, and was sent off to kill Thanos, and all of his stories basically revolved around that until Thanos was dead. So eventually he reunites with his daughter Moondragon, but they have no relationship with each other because she was a little bitty girl when they were parted in the accident. And so they don't really have a relationship, but she has these mental powers, and she ended up using her powers to not only control her father, but also to control this entire planet full of people. They're a warlike race that won't stop killing each other. And so she basically decides that she's going to be the god of this race and eventually become like a celestial being throughout the universe, starting on this planet. And her father has just enough willpower left to contact the Avengers and drag them into the situation. And they eventually figure out that she's putting a mental whammy on this entire planet, and specifically with the help of Thor Thor and Wasp sucker punching her, they managed to knock her out, but not before she used her mental powers to psychically attack her dad and ultimately kill him by mistake. She didn't do it on purpose, but she directed so much psychic power at him that he dies. And then once they take her to be judged by the Asgardians, since she decided that she was going to be a goddess, they figured, well, you can be judged by actual gods then. The warlock races went back at each other. That's what the Baboni
Sounds like a much better story than a lot of that Marvel they've been cranking lately. I mean, you know, they started out doing some pretty
movies.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
it stinks. The 3D stinks. The storyline stinks. And who gives a crap about Loki?
Hella.
I was glad the first time they killed him.
Aside from their two-part Avengers story, the BA-BANI have only ever appeared again in flashbacks to that story. And as a reference point, the yellow-skinned aliens went right back to killing each other once Moondragon was taken to Odin to be tried for her transgressions.
Back in 1940, 8 sensational heroes united to create the world's very first superhero team, the Justice Society of America. Now, 85 years later, we're gathering podcasters and bloggers from around the globe for a month-long celebration in an event we're calling JS April. Throughout April 2025, join dozens of all-star podcasters and bloggers as they each share their own unique tributes to the original and greatest superhero team, covering exciting topics like
Superman Family number 211, October 1981.
Mr. and Mrs. Superman attend the wedding of Batman and Catwoman.
JSA number 1 from 2024.
JSA 68 through 72.
All-Star Comics number 58.
JSA number 59 from 2004.
Justice League of America 171.
And Justice League of America 172.
The Legacy of the JSA character names.
The Brave and the Bold number 61.
The Golden Age Wonder Woman JSA Adventures.
JLA, JSA, Virtue and Vice, 2002.
DC Special number 29, featuring the untold origin of the Justice Society.
Infinity Inc. Annual number 1, JSA number 38, and the Stargirl TV series.
Justice Society of America number 6 from 1993.
Justice Society of America number 20.
Justice Society of America Annual number 1, 2008.
Justice Society of America number 10 from 2007.
All-Star Comics number 4 from 1941.
The Wonder Woman Spectacular from 1978.
Celebrate with JSA 85th birthday cookies.
The 1987 Infinity Inc. and Outsiders Specials.
Wanted, the world's most dangerous villains number 6 from 1973.
The recent Alan Scott Green Lantern miniseries.
Examining the role of the Justice Society in the crisis.
And the effect the crisis had on the team.
More Fun Comics 55 from 1940.
Contrasting the Justice Society of America versus Marvel's Invaders.
In Post-Crisis, how the JSA inspired the JLA.
Justice League of America number 29 through 30, plus The Flash number 123.
Golden Age Origins number 1.
Showcase number 97 to 99 from 1978.
The Justice Society versus Extant.
All-Star Squadron, issues 19 and 20 from 1983.
All-Star Comics, issues 60 to 63.
JSA number 56 through number 58 from 2004.
JSA, The Liberty File.
Justice Society of America, Thy Kingdom Come.
And that's just some of the topics that will be covered during the celebration. Get ready for a thrilling month of beloved characters, fascinating insights, and incredible stories. Follow the action on social media with the hashtag JSApril, and visit our website for a complete list of participating podcasters, bloggers, and what they're each covering at fireandwaterpodcast.com/JSApril.
Editorial. The Marvel Universe began 21 years ago with the publication of Fantastic Four number 1 in November 1961. The Fantastic Four weren't at all like the cardboard cutout heroes who populated other companies' comics. They had life, vitality, and personality. At last, there were comic stories that even adults could appreciate. The FF was a hit, and quickly, Marvel Comics, which up until then had been known as Timely/Atlas, followed with other heroes of equal appeal: the Hulk, Thor, Spider-Man, Ant-Man, Iron Man, and Doctor Strange. These heroes, and the many who came later, shared the humanness and vitality that characterized the Fantastic Four. But what is more remarkable and important is that all of these heroes shared the same world, Before the Marvel heroes came along, comic characters seemed entrenched in their own private, isolated worlds, seldom to intermingle or even acknowledge one another's existence. But the Marvel heroes from the beginning were different. Their adventures were set in a common universe. Heroes and villains would pop up in each other's magazines without fanfare. Events would be noted in several titles. The world was dynamic and ever-changing. And most significantly, the changes were cumulative. They made a difference. If the FF's headquarters got wrecked one issue, the next issue would still be wrecked, and they'd have to cope with repairing it. If the Torch lost his girlfriend one issue, he'd still be pining for her the next. Things did not return to a dull, placid status quo in a Marvel comic. The world of Marvel Comics was more like the real world than any comic book had ever been before. Besides events making a difference like in real life, there were real-world locales to the Marvel stories. Heroes and villains had true-to-life problems, and motives, and feelings. Powers seemed finite, down to earth enough to believe in. One actually got the feeling that if you lived in New York, you could probably look out the window and see Spider-Man swing by. Put all these things together, and you have a cohesive, believable setting, where each month you could participate in the lives of the Marvel heroes. This setting we've come to call the Marvel Universe. And that brings us to the official Handbook of the Marvel Universe. This 12-part monthly series is our first attempt to catalog the wonderful and multifarious inhabitants and phenomena that exist within the Marvel Universe. No mere list of names is this. No dry recitation of basic facts either. Rather, it is a lavishly illustrated handbook filled with new artwork and more information than has ever before been revealed about the origins and powers of the Marvel superstars. So this is it, the last word on the Marvels of the universe, from Abomination to Zax, and maybe beyond. Hope you enjoy it. Mark Gruenwald, editor.
Face front, true believers. The official listeners of the Marvel Handbook podcast are
the 108th Sage, who added Indeed. I've been really enjoying these episodes, and the many voices coming together to cover these entries. Chris Dumford, Daniel French, Fishbonius Sound Design, Del Dracula, Doc Strange, Dirk Ashton, who added, Thanks RSP, Ed Moore, Fog Weaver, The Hammer Strikes, Random Geeky Stuff, History of Comics on Film, Jim Imbruglia, Julia Rowell, Carl Attersberg, Kenny Crawley Jr., Carowin, King Size Comics, Giant Size Fun Podcast, Liz and Oswalt, Luke Giaconetti of Earth Destruction Directive, Peacebound and Down, a Wonder Woman podcast, Rad Adventures, Randy Caldwell, Resurrections, an Adam Warlock and Thanos podcast, Scott Free, Sis Hoyd, Warlord Worlds, Weapon Extra, Writing Book Number 3, Wonder Woman, Warrior for Peace podcast, who added, I had a great time talking with Frank about the Avengers. Check it out. And finally, Xenozoic Xenophiles.
all characters and concepts appearing in the official handbook of the Marvel Universe and the distinct likenesses thereof are the trademark and copyright of Marvel Entertainment LLC, a subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company. This has been a non-for-profit fan production from Rolled Spine Podcast. Any copyrighted material presented herein are presumed covered under fair use, with no infringement intended. Till next time, Excelsior!